You might think of real estate agents only for buying and selling property, but did you know that they have a heap of knowledge that can add value to your next renovation or new home project? In the previous episodes, I covered the cost of house construction to help you understand what your design ideas or your house plans might cost. In today's episode, we move on to the next step in the renovate or sell journey: property value and feasibility. In the Renovation Collaborative podcasts, I interview industry experts and find out the latest practical info to help you renovate smarter. My name is Stephanie Skyring. I'm an Australian architect with 20 plus years of experience helping people create better, more environmental homes on any budget. In today's episode, you'll find out how a good real estate agent can help you answer your design brief and budget questions and add real value to your home. I'll be talking to experienced real estate agent Tim Douglas from Place West Estate Agents in Paddington, Brisbane. Good morning, Tim, and welcome to the Renovation Collaborative On the Tools podcast.
Good morning, Stephanie. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your expertise.
No, it's a pleasure to be here.
So my first question: people typically think of real estate agents just when they're going to buy a house, but I know that you've got so much more knowledge to offer because you've actually got a unique position because you're at the coalface there talking to home buyers about what they want in houses and what they like, what they don't like. So you've got so much knowledge there to bring to the table to help potential renovators create their design brief and budget. So it's really aligned with what the market wants, and so they can really add value to their property. Do you find that many people are aware of that? Do you get asked by many renovators about advice on their brief?
Yeah, we do. Probably not as much as I'd like, but we do get asked to come in and give ideas on should we sell. It's more like should we sell it as is, or should we actually do some work on the property? So a lot of that time we will enter into the property, give them advice on what it's worth today, and then maybe with their ideas or an architect's ideas that's been there, an idea of what the end result will be prior to them doing the work, and then after, and we try and give an assessment on that when it's finished as well. So it's always a hard, if people haven't got plans and things like that, to give a real assessment, but after being around as long as I have, I suppose, in the market, to give people can throw ideas of what they're extending and what they're trying to do to their homes, and I can give them a fairly good understanding of what that looks like for them at the end result as well. And
so from what you were saying there, it sounded like people were usually asking you when they were thinking of selling. Do you get many people who have no intention of selling, they just want advice from you about design brief? I mean, obviously they will sell down the track, but do you get much of that, or it's just those people who are pondering selling in the next couple of years and they're trying to maximise the value, wondering whether they should fix up the bathroom or shouldn't, or should they just sell it as is?
Yeah, it's funny. It's normally people that are going to be selling in the next 1 to 2 years, and their reason for it is that getting their renovation done for that reason. A lot of friends will come and ask me for that advice, and they're not selling. So we don't get a lot of it from people outside who are looking to renovate and do a large renovation if they're going to be staying there, let's say 5 to 10 years.
Oh, okay. And so obviously as a real estate agent, are you happy for that sort of advice, for people to come and ask you that sort of information, even though they might not be selling in the immediate future?
Yeah, sure. Any touch point with any person out there that might be selling today, tomorrow, and 10 years' time or so, certainly we're happy to be talking to those people about their renovations and what they're extending to do. I mean, we're there to help as well, obviously, to give advice on what we think is the best for them. And I think it is very much for them too. I think people get a little bit wound up. If their intention is to stay in the home for and use it for, let's say, 5 to 10 years or 20 years and stay there for a long period of time, I'm always very much do it for you, not do it for the market, as much as because over time land value does increase. So the work that you do and the money you spend today in that time, and you need to change it for a reason. Let's say you want to change a bathroom around it, it works for you but doesn't work for the next, so the masses. Then to me, I'd say, well, you can go and do that and change that when you go to sell it in 10 or 20 years' time. And the market will have, the land value, etc., and the market will have absorbed that cost that you've spent, but you've had the 10 to 15 years to use that how you wanted it.
Yeah, that's really great advice, because that is always the big question. And I did read somewhere years ago that Australia was the only place that designed houses for the next person. They weren't thinking so much about themselves. What sort of information can real estate agents provide to help people with their renovation or new house projects, sort of regarding brief or budget, or what sorts of things can you help with?
Yeah, so I suppose that comes down to layout and how they want to design the home internally and externally. And like one of the biggest things is, do we chase the view or don't we chase the view?
Yes.
And especially around inner city Brisbane, but where it is quite hilly, do we put the living down?
Oh, that's the big question.
Or do we put it up?
Yes. Sorry, can I just go back for anyone who didn't understand that? So often if you've got a sloping site and you could have the living downstairs flowing out, connecting with the garden, the pool, etc., or you could put the living on the upper level and catch the view. But if you put the living on the lower level, you won't get the view.
That's right.
The debate.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Melbourne and Sydney, a little bit different. Obviously, Sydney inner city, when you're chasing water views, very much, they're a little bit like us. But Melbourne being a lot flatter, and Adelaide, etc., they more tend to have living down and bedrooms up. From my experience of living in Melbourne and Sydney,
yes.
And over the years. But look, I think that is one thing that is a question that are very much asked up here of us. Do we put it down, the living down? So yeah, there is a whole lot of parts to that design brief that I suppose that we can help with over periods of time with, do you have, for example, for the children's bedrooms, do we put walk-in wardrobes and en-suites into them? And that comes down to, once again, budget and what people are willing to spend, and also size of block and what they can actually put on the site itself.
So sometimes I've got clients and as an architect, and they've got me over to give them some advice because they're potentially thinking of selling, and they think, look, we'll just fix up a few things before we sell it. We might fix up the bathroom, we might give it a coat of paint, we might fix up the kitchen, etc. And I tend to say to them, just don't touch anything until you've spoken to a real estate agent, because you may be adding value that isn't worth adding, or you may be personalising it too much. What's your advice on that? Should they do anything before they speak to you, or should they just find out what the market wants before they do anything?
Look, that depends on the location and position and what it is. And the nature of the home itself. If it's too far gone, sometimes you are better off just leaving it as it is, and not doing any work to it. And sometimes it's that beautiful unrenovated blank canvas that people talk about.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes they are too far gone, and you're better off just leaving them and not spending the money. And that advice we're there to give as agents, I suppose. And then you've got one like at the moment that it was a renovation 25 years ago that effectively does, and I went in there and I just went, it does need work, and it does need a paint. It does need floors done. So little bits and pieces of maintenance that need to be done to maximise your return, which we've organised for them to get the painters in and the workmanship done, the gardens done, etc. So
that's great.
Yeah, to me that's really important for that home because it was an architecturally designed home.
Oh, the bones were good to start with.
The bones were good, right?
Right.
So, if your bones are good, then
Yes.
sometimes you're better off to just, work around those and bring them back to almost new, even though it might be a 27-year-old architecturally designed home. At that point, you're probably better to bring that back. There's also other scenarios. For example, if it's on a busier road, you don't want to be spending too much money. If you've owned it for a while, maybe that's where you've got your growth anyway. If it's been a flooded home, for example, maybe you don't do too much to it because you don't want to throw money at it. And you've owned it for a few years. You don't want to throw money at it today that you just may not get back, right? So it's a bit of a pick and choose of what that looks like, and I think I can give that advice to people, and I'd like to think that most agents could do that to people about what they shouldn't be doing to the home when they're going to market.
Yeah, it's very case by case, isn't it? That's interesting. That's why I think it's just so careful. Just don't assume you know, because the real estate agents are the ones who know that market. Because I had an interesting case once where I told some clients that before they did anything, they should talk to an agent, and the agent had advised them that if they'd done that work, they would have pushed themselves actually into the next bracket, but that house and the bones of that house wasn't worthy of the next bracket. So they would have sort of pushed themselves into a place where they actually would have trouble selling it. Whereas if they hadn't done any work, they could have sold it more easily. So there's all sorts of funny little things which you just really need to understand the local market.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not a pure science, so it's something that you've got to work on case by case. There's no doubt about that.
So the next couple of questions are for those trying to work out if their house is worth renovating and the approximate amount to spend. So sometimes houses are not worth renovating, and this might be caused by the design of the house itself or the site or the location. And in this market where the cost of construction is so high, it's absolutely essential, I think, to really think very carefully before you throw money away on a property that's not worth renovating, and you were sort of alluding to that in the previous question. So Tim, based on your experience, what are the most common features that make a property not worth renovating that sort of come to mind most frequently?
Yeah, I think not worth renovating. There's a few stages of renovations, aren't there? Do we put an extension on, or do we do the bathrooms up? Do we do the kitchens? So it really comes down to, or do we just paint? Like I always say to people, paint's your best friend.
Oh, yes.
Right, because it's inexpensive. So
and transformational.
Transformational. So you can have those little cottages that can be 100 years old and throw a coat of paint on them and they look like they were done yesterday from externally. Then when you come inside, then that can be, depending on floors and have they had any bora, have they had any of that sort of bits and pieces over the years. And we're just talking about a straight, unrenovated little cottage. Do you put a little cheaper kitchen in and bathroom in? Well, that's probably going to cost you $100,000 to do something like that on a very basic 2 to 3 bedroom cottage on a 405 square metre block of land. And that's probably 100 to 150 with the costs. It's probably more like 150 now to do those basics. So, that's a big spend out of your pocket today where no one ever knows. This is the fascinating part about it. No one really knows, are you going to get the return? Now, people look at returns differently. So on that $150,000 spend, are you going to make a 20% return on it, right? Are you going to get your money back? Some people are like, and I do say this sometimes, if you do spend the money on it tidying up, it may get a little bit more money. Hopefully it'll get your money back. But what it will do is it will entice more volume of buyers to the property. Now, if you've got more volume of buyers to the property, then you're going to have a better opportunity of, getting a bigger price effectively. So you got to think of the work that is being done on the home, even if it is just a nice paint job to tidy it up, as long as it's not too far gone and it's an absolute, hovel. then sometimes you're just better off leaving them. You got to hope that that's going to give you at least your money back, and if you could, get a return of, let's say, 10 or 20% back on that money that you spent on it.
Oh, that's interesting, because I always wonder about that. Like if you're going to put in, because it's more than just the cost of, the kitchen and the work. There's a lot of, whenever you're renovating, even if you're renovating with the help of an architect or consultants, there's still a lot of time and a lot of thinking and a lot of, there's a lot of effort that goes into any changes. So I was always of the thought that, you really want to get some return on that. But that's interesting about you really just are trying to entice people to come and look at the property and
that's
to consider it.
And that's really what it's about. And it's a bit like putting, staging furniture in homes as well. It's there to, obviously, for people to understand the layout of the home a little bit better with the furniture, because that does help
so
people.
So important, yeah.
Does help people as well. But staging 15, 20 years ago wasn't around.
It's like, what was that?
What was that? And I suppose I've sold plenty of houses without staging for good money. So it's interesting, but they're new trends that are on, and then people get used to those trends and expect them. I think it's one of those things that spending the right money in the right places is crucial to get the right return for your property.
Yeah, and that's the bottom line really, isn't it? And that's really what I'm getting at today, is that you're the people to advise on those particular things if you're selling in the short term.
Yeah, and you've got to, your agent's got to have confidence that that the advice that they're giving is going to do the right thing. I always go to any property in a sense of okay, this is mine, what would I do to it?
Yes.
And that to me, then I know that I'm giving the right advice. Do you know what I mean? Because
I do.
It's sort of what I'm going to do for them is what I would do for myself.
And that's exactly how I approach design as well. I have to keep going till I would be 100% happy to live in that house.
It's important.
Yeah. So if people were putting together a design brief and really trying to understand, what are the things that potential buyers always look for? Like, what is always popular in a house? So are there any particular things that come to mind that would help people with their design brief?
So there is, they're changing and have changed over the years. Design brief now, everyone's looking very much for a secondary living space, very important. Where 15 years ago that was a sort of a theatre room.
Oh, right, yes.
So that more than likely now they're everyone's on iPads and phones and all those sort of things. So that sort of room's disappeared now into more of a secondary living space. Then there is obviously walk-in wardrobe and en-suites, absolutely crucial if you're going to do a brand new home.
This is for a master bedroom?
This is for a master
bedroom, yeah.
And a lot of the time people are putting in guest bedroom with a walk-in wardrobe or an ensuite attached as well.
Yes.
The other thing is, and there's lavish, but do you add a walk-in wardrobe and an ensuite to your children's bedrooms? And there's been a bit of a trend to that, but that comes down to house size, land, etc., and what you can actually do that.
Yes, your market, who's in the area.
Yeah. So, or a two-way type of shared bathroom. That's sort of a design feature. The other thing is car accommodation. Rather than a 2 to a 3, that's something that people are sort of looking for as well, or that option of having that there. So that's sort of, and that comes down to obviously price point too, and all of this is price point.
Absolutely, it depends what market you're in.
Yeah. So I think there's some really, people love a mudroom as you walk through the home to the laundry, etc.
Yes.
If you've got a young family, you put school bags and things like that.
Just a dumping ground for all those dirty things. Yeah,
that's exactly
shoes
right.
and stuff.
Yeah. And then your laundry can combine. I'm finding there's a lot of laundry combined with that, and then into the kitchen, through from the car accommodation. So there's some other design features that sort of people are sort of liking out there in the marketplace. But certainly that secondary living space is pretty important as well.
And I think a lot of those things that you've just mentioned there can be adapted for across a lot of budgets. Obviously the en-suites for kids' bathrooms and stuff is not, for kids' bedrooms I should say, is not really adaptable. That's quite a high-end thing. But a lot of those other things, you can easily adapt a laundry to have a bit of a mudroom in it, and where you place that in your plan.
So the other thing is bedroom sizes. Important to get that bedroom size. A lot of people are looking for a little workspace in the bedrooms for their children, desk, and also wardrobes in their bedrooms as well, which is important.
Built-in wardrobes.
Yes.
Is that particularly like in older houses where there aren't built-in wardrobes and they want to get those in there? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, if possible, if those rooms are large enough to do that, or you're sacrificing a room to be able to do that as well. But if people are putting large extensions on these homes, then you can normally make that work.
That's right. Yeah, it's easy with the new work, yeah. So one thing that comes up for me, it comes up all the time, but more so in recent years, is swimming pools, which is interesting because I've been an architect for 20 years, say, and in the first 10 years, so up to about 10 years ago, no one even talked about swimming pools. And then I've noticed in the last 10 years or so, people have been asking about swimming pools, and to the point where now in Brisbane, lots of people will say that's definitely on their list. What's your experience with adding swimming pools and whether they add value, and are people looking for them?
They are looking for them, there's no doubt about it. They add lifestyle. So I think, back, you're right, 20 years ago, there was the kidney-shaped pool that didn't ever look fantastic in the backyard.
I know. There's one filled in down the back of my mother's house.
That's right. And I'm sure I've told a few people in those days, we might do something like with that pool and maybe fill it in. But, so I think the new modern pool in the right position in the house or around the house is a must, I think. I wouldn't be doing a renovation on a house and not putting one on the site.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. And so we're talking about that in Brisbane. Do you have any other, obviously, and that's because of our climate here and potentially because of climate change. Can you give me any other advice about any other states? Obviously the colder states, it's not an issue, but what about Sydney? Is it still popular down there?
I think so. Sydney and Melbourne, it's a lifestyle point for children to, my three kids, my wife's three kids, that's where the kids lived. It was in the pool. We didn't have a big backyard, but they spent their life, mucking around in the pool. So it's a good time waster, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. If you can have a pool, it's fantastic.
That's right. So I think, if you've got a young family, I think it's great for that. I think as your children get older, they don't go into it, but I certainly go into our pool and use it as an ice bath in the winter.
Yeah, that's right.
To me, I think it's a must. And it's a really nice design feature around a home too, and it visually aesthetic to the home as well. So I think it's, you build barbecues around it and all those sort of things that give you a lifestyle.
So one of the questions that comes up for me a lot in design, thinking about working out your design brief, is about baths. So, depending on the age of the family, obviously families with young children want a bath, but then when you get families that have teenage children or older couples and they're like, well, I don't really want a bath. I'm not a bath person. What do I need to do about the bath? What's your advice on both? Do they need a bath? And I know you touched on this before. If this is a 20-year solution, the house is for you, so don't put in something that you have to clean. But should it go in the ensuite or the bathroom, or do you have any advice on that, if they should or shouldn't have a bath and where it should go?
Well, just on... if you got room, I think you put it in the bathroom rather than
the house bathroom.
House bathroom. Once again, it's a little bit to the individual, because if someone likes a bath, you want it in the
That's right. If
they're
male
or female
person
likes the bath, then they might have it in their ensuite if they use a bath consistently, I suppose. But normally it would be in the main bathroom. It would be the place to put it. Look, I can only go on my own experience. When we had 3 young kids, we had a bath and we had 1 bathroom in a little cottage, and they were in the bath all the time, right? And that we used, and then we moved from that house, and we got a bath in a new home that was already there. And the only person, I reckon, in that time, we still had young children, it's probably been a handful of times over 15 years that we've actually used the bath. In fact, the only person the only animal that uses the bath.
I was going to say, I knew where this was going.
is the dog.
Yes.
Right? So, that's where the bath is used at the moment, right? Is bathing the pooch. Right?
Oh, that's so true. And that's funny because, if, as you said, if one of the adults is a bath person, then you put the bath in the ensuite. And I just remember talking to a client after we went through this whole exercise, we ended up putting the bath in the ensuite. And she said, I come home on a Saturday and who's in the bath is my 16-year-old boy after football. And you're like, oh, that wasn't what I wanted for my beautiful ensuite.
That's right. Yeah.
It's similar to the dog.
That's right. Exactly. And, that might be an ice bath for him too.
Yeah, that's right. So sometimes people want to do more personal or unusual things with their house, whether it's colour, whether it's style. As a general rule, do very personal approaches like this make a house difficult to sell?
Yes, is the word.
Those big... And paint is sort of manageable, isn't it? Although, that would be the first thing you would say, get rid of all those colours in there.
Yeah, 20 years ago, didn't we go through those feature walls?
I know.
And even 20 years ago, I went into people, and as much as I loved them, I sort of said, can we maybe throw a coat of paint on that?
Yeah.
Those at least it was only a coat of paint then. But, there are parts of homes that can be a little bit off-putting to the mass market, I suppose.
And so what sorts of things would you see? One that probably comes to mind, paint's the easy one. And even though painting has gone up in price now, throwing a coat of paint on something is not quite as cheap as it used to be. But potentially kitchens with cabinetry colours that aren't, and that's harder to fix if it's, reasonably good quality cabinetry still. Any other things that come to mind that are more unique that you're sort of thinking, just be careful with that one if you're not in it for the long term?
Yeah, some of those are tiles, tiles in bathrooms and those sorts of things. Those feature tiles that we might put in bathrooms, and that people go, why would they have put that there?
I know, just not to everyone's taste. Just being very careful that your taste is not necessarily everyone's taste.
That's right.
Yeah.
But then again, a lot of the stuff today is getting quite bland too, that people aren't being more
It's super bland. I was going to say, I just got to a point there where I was like, I can't do another white kitchen.
Yeah. So I think those sort of, once again, trends are changing. People do change over time. So, I remember a house done that we had in Melbourne in the 70s, and it was an architecturally designed house my parents did, and it was cool.
Yeah.
And that 70s feel was just extraordinarily, ahead of its time effectively, even though that was the time it was there. But, which was quite unique. And with rich red colours and blacks and all those sort of things, right? But, I think today, you just do have to be careful. I think if, once again, it's for you and you think you can change it, and it's quick change because I think every 7 to 10 years things sort of start to go out of date anyway.
They do.
So it's a bit like if you buy a unit today, a brand new unit off the plan, probably in 15 years' time, it needs a new kitchen, needs a new bathroom, it needs a new freshen up. And it's the same with every house. And people say to me, oh, Tim, this suburb's been renovated fully. And I go, well, not really, because after every 15, 20, 25 years, it needs another go on that house, right? So it's a constant change and, evolving of homes over a period of time as, life goes on, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the key message there is that it can have individual style potentially as long as it's skillfully done. Like you mentioned the 70s, so professionally done in a way that can, this is really challenging really actually, because I'm going to say move past style. So there's some character about it that is engaging.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I suppose trends in what are those trends that tend to architecturally and internally, still stand the test of time, is those marbles and
yes,
those sorts of things.
Beautiful things, beautiful materials.
Beautiful materials tend to stand the test of time. So I think it's a bit like an old cottage. People just love the old cottage look and front. So you can still put a modern extension on the back, but the front is beautiful. It's like a Victorian terrace or, a Sydney home, 1930s Sydney home that you can put those, but people love the front of them. So I think they're things that you need to be careful with, but I think you can add your own feel to them, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. So another question that comes up is about whether to do renovations that are dissimilar to what is generally happening with the demographic in an area. So hypothetically, just to give an example that I've been asked a number of times recently in a suburb of Brisbane, which is it's got generous block size, it's got generous houses, it's a family area, sort of 4 to 6 bedrooms. And then potentially I might have an older couple who have lived there all their lives. They have had a big house in Brisbane. They'd like to stay in Brisbane, but they don't. They want to design something new and they want to do it smaller, and they want to do potentially a 2 or 3 bedroom smaller house in a suburb like that. How does that sit with the market? And is there – I wondered about it because I thought, well, surely not everyone who wants to live in Brisbane wants those bigger houses. And does that diversity work, or is that a problem when it comes to resale?
The only problem with this is land per square metre.
You're undercapitalising on the site.
That's right.
Yeah.
And this is the thing where you almost could get away with not doing a lavish renovation 25 years ago, 30 years ago on the site, because the land in Brisbane wasn't as expensive as it is today. And that's a massive jump that it's had.
Oh, it has been.
Like, it's huge. So you can't half do these things. And that's what I say to people these days. You can't half do these homes. You've got to look at the value of the land and then basically do it accordingly. The renovation or the extension or the house size. There is that market of that downsizer that would like to be able to look. If they've owned the land for 40 years, they paid nothing for it realistically, and they were able to knock their house that they were in and then build a smaller, low set brick home on it. It might cost them $1.5 million to do something like that or whatever. To me, that they've got to make that choice. Okay, well, it will be worth something when they sell it, but it might not be worth exactly this. But who cares in 10 or 20 years' time, because once again, someone will come in there and do something else to it.
Yes.
But if they're getting 10 or 15 years of use of how they want it, well, everything going perfectly as it has in the last 30 years, then, land should still increase in value over that time as well. So it is a hard one, but I think it really comes down to the circumstances that person is in and how long they've owned the land for. And how big their budget is, and not how big their budget is, how they are financially. I think that's a really important part of, is this an affordable thing for them to do and sit there and not maximise the actual value of the land fully?
Oh, I see. And because one of the things that I was thinking of with that is potentially with a situation like that, if you did the smaller house but you did it in such a way that it could easily be extended onto, does that make it more viable?
That's why you're the architect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that does.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. So you could, build it to the front a little bit more.
Correct,
so
and the size of
extend.
the rooms and the size of the kitchen and stuff lends itself to a bigger dwelling.
Perfect.
You just, so you might have big entertaining areas because that's what you want to do. You just don't want heaps of bedrooms and you don't want the second living area. You just want to have a life,
Yes,
but not with lots of children there all the time.
that's right.
So that potentially makes more sense, is that?
Yeah.
Than as you suggested, the small brick building on the low set. Maybe it has to access the ground, but it's not. You're suddenly not, downsizing to something ordinary. It is the same sort of, style and scale as what's in the suburb, but not as big.
And there's probably a gap. It's funny at the moment that I see people looking to downsize, and I say to them, well, you're ready to downsize, because I know it's sort of hard when their children are probably 20, 25, maybe years of age. Well, look, only 10 years' time, they might have grandchildren.
I know they'll be back.
And they'll be back with their grandchildren. So I sort of sit there and go, guys, you're downsizing, or thinking about downsizing, but is that the right thing right now? The garden's getting too hard to look after. Get a gardener in. It's a lot cheaper than selling your home and then buying something else.
I know.
So I know it's putting me out of a job, but sometimes that is something that you throw at people and go, well, that's a bit different. I haven't thought about that. But these are things that, in short periods of time, grandchildren, if that's what people are having and they're coming back, then, suddenly that house that they had their children grow up with seems to be not so big anymore when suddenly grandchildren start arriving as well. So, you've got to ask yourself all these questions, because every time you sell something and buy something, there's a big cost, right? There's taxes involved.
Cost,
and all those sort of things. And can you, make something of your house that, and I just say to people, it's too big, close a couple of doors, close a couple of bedrooms, go in there once every 6 months and vacuum it. And then, so I suppose they're the things about downsizing that I sort of ask people when they're thinking about it, just to throw some ideas in their head as well.
It's a very tricky window, that window of your kids are, because people often think of it, I think they think, in the early 20s the kids will leave. Well, they may have a crack at it, but then they'll be back.
That's right.
So then they sort of come back, and then maybe sort of mid 20s, there's probably like maybe 7 to 10 years in there. That's the tricky period, because then after that they're definitely back and they're saying, can you look after the kids?
That's right.
Because I've got this job that I've got to hold down to carry the cost of living. Like, it's really hard.
Correct. Double income, and that's both people are out working these days. It's
to manage the cost of living, yeah. So moving forward now, for anyone planning to renovate or build a new home, when's the best time to approach a real estate agent to get some advice on their renovation ideas? So this is for people who aren't thinking of selling. They're thinking of staying in there, 10, 20 years, but they just want to get that brief right. They may end up doing what they want to do, but I always say it's really good to do your homework, so at least you know what the market wants, and then you can make a decision either way.
Yeah, so it's a hard one. For me, I'd rather be called in early to give people that advice. But then again, I can sort of visualise what people can do with it anyway, so I'm happy to come in earlier and give some advice there. My advice would be to get an agent in first, get an understanding what the property is worth today.
That's right. We haven't touched on that yet, which is budget, which is a really important one, which it's more than brief. It's understanding what the budget is, and then you can work out what the appropriate spend is.
Correct. So then you get a sort of an understanding of an appraisal sort of price or of what the place is worth today, and then, going out, then I go and spend a certain amount of money on it. And then you can put the two together and work out, it's worth this when it's going to cost me this much effectively. Because let's say you paid $1 million for it, 10 years ago, and you've lived in it quite comfortably, and then next minute the agent comes in and says it's worth 1.8 million today as it stands. Then effectively you're buying it back today at 1.8 and then doing the renovation on it. So you effectively then you're spending another $2 million on the renovation. Then then we're really looking at 3.8 million.
That's right. And will the local area tolerate that price? Is that what people?
Well, that's what it's that's exactly right. Will it tolerate it? But I think then it gives you an idea. Well, from my point of view, is that a scenario? Can I find something else out there today worth 4.8 million?
Yes,
Right,
and get what I want.
And get what I want.
Yeah.
So that does change a little bit in your own mindset of what you can do. But they're just questions, and a lot of people out there at the moment are doing that. They're coming out to our open houses and going, "We've got the cost back for building it, and it is expensive, and we're just out to have a look." At that point, they get an understanding of what else there is out there in the marketplace for them, and are they better off to go and find something that is done for them, or is it better off going, no, we love our position and we're going to stay there, and then they're more secure in about what they're spending on the property they're actually going to go and renovate and do. So I think that's a nice way of going, because then you're not leaving any stone unturned effectively.
That's right. It's about doing your research. Yeah. And it's such a useful process that, and I also think, you just did that sum there, which was like, what's the current value? What's the added value of the, I think, I can't remember what your numbers were there, but you basically had what's the property worth today? What's the potential renovation going to be worth? And I always think there's more on top of that as well. And I always say to people, make sure when you go shopping for a new house, you're actually shopping with the right value, because that might be the possible price of the renovation from an initial estimate. But there's sort of contingency and design creep and putting in new turf that got damaged, accommodation elsewhere during the renovation. So there's a few extra costs, and I always find if people actually go shopping with the right number, which is often higher than they think, they might be pushing into another bracket of houses, which is the value they'd be at the end of their renovation anyway, without all the fuss.
Yeah, well, I think I got those numbers right, but it was 1.8 plus 2
you did.
is
No, I
3.8.
couldn't remember
I can't remember whether it said
yeah.
3.8 or 4.8. But anyway, 3.8. So, yeah, you're going out shopping with that sort of money in your back pocket. But that's right. It's those
It really, I think it's like shopping with the
extra.
four, really. If that's where you're at, you've got to add.
Million.
Yeah. So, and it can make a lot of difference. Like, because I know in the market there's sort of points where after you get to a certain point, there's a lot less people in that bracket. There's a lot of, there's all of the shoppers are up to a certain amount of money because the first home buyers, and then so making sure you're shopping with the right amount of money, and really looking at the market with the amount that you will actually spend. But when it comes to the end of the day, if you did renovate, it's really important.
Yeah, that's right. And it's that money, it always comes back to money effectively at the end of the day, and what you are going to spend today versus, a 1 or 2 year sort of build program.
That's right.
And you'd think in that time you're going to have a little bit of growth in that period of time of house price increase and all the rest of it. So, but, people have just, if they spend the time going and having a look what they can do and can buy for what the value of their house is today plus the cost of the renovation, I think is a good step.
So my next question is about construction budget and avoiding overcapitalisation and thinking about smaller renovations. So moving house costs money. So if you can renovate and add value to your home within the costs of relocation, it can be a better option to stay. Can you tell me the typical relocation costs that apply to help people work out their budget? I always, it depends what the price of the property is, but is there like stamp duty or what are the things?
Yeah, well, obviously there's stamp duty.
Yeah.
Depending on what their next buy is.
Yeah.
And that can be, call it 60 to 180,000, depending on price. And then you've got agents' fees on top of that, and that's generally, if it's $1 million, it's about 50,000.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
And then you've got marketing on top of that, which today, I say to people, it doesn't cost what it used to cost when we're using the papers. Like, it's actually quite cheaper to market homes today because of the web compared to using papers and those sort of things. I used to go into every house 15, 20 years ago and, to use the papers when we didn't have the web, it still cost you $10,000 or $15,000 to market your home, right, in all the papers. So it's actually a lot cheaper today than what it was then. Except,
what about, and I'm going off topic a bit here, because what about styling? How much that's quite a cost, isn't it?
That's probably where your other money's spent.
Yes.
We're trying to save, but suddenly someone comes up with another idea, right? So then, you're sort of getting a house done anywhere between, let's say, a smaller 3-bedroom home with 2 bathrooms. Little cottages probably anywhere between 3.5 to 5. And
do they style with your furniture, or do they take all your stuff somewhere and put all other stuff in?
Let's call it 5 rule of thumb. Would get rid of all of your stuff and put back in.
Oh, right.
There are more expensive people as well, obviously. That could cost you 8 to 10 to 15 too.
Yeah.
Right, depending on house size and all the rest of it. But, people I use, it's trying to keep within budget, would normally cost anywhere between 4 to, I just did one the other day, it's 5.5, but it's a big home, it's a 5-bedroom home.
Wow. And so to take everything away and put it all back, and it's, seems quite reasonable really to transfer the whole house over.
What you know, it's who you know.
Yeah, definitely. So adding up those costs there, which you've said, that's sort of maybe around the sort of 250, 300 somewhere there. Is that sort of right? So if you could add some quality value, like add a bedroom, really transform your living areas, or do something good under that 300,000, it's a no-brainer to stay. Is that, obviously other things aside, if it floods or you're on a main road, or there's other really challenges about the house. But if it's reasonable and you're trying to work it out, would you?
Yeah, if you like the position and it's probably reasonable, you're spending $200,000 to $300,000 on your home to just tidy it up and stay there and enjoy it.
Yeah, get some value.
Absolutely. Yeah. You think that money that you're going to spend on it is going to be, you're going to get back, right? As well when you go to sell it, because it's going to be fresh and newly done and it looks smart. And so there's value in that.
So if they were coming to see you, you've said you'd like to see them as early as possible in that phase. What information does it help to bring to talk to you? If they'd had some preliminary sketch ideas, is that helpful? Is that useful?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people by that stage, they've got those preliminary drawings done and an understanding of what they're trying to achieve.
Yes.
So most of the time at that point we've got some plans and things like that to look at to see what they're intending to do with the home.
And then that must help you understand then not what it's going to be worth exactly, but you can look at it and say, that's a 4-bedroom, it's got all the bells and whistles required in the market. That would, we could be expecting that to, if it's done well, fall into this price bracket. Is that what you would be thinking when you're looking at those plans?
Yeah, that's right. We can give them that advice on what we think it's worth when it's completed. There's no doubt about that. We've got a pretty good understanding of what that is based on other things we've sold recently that are fully renovated, done homes. There's no doubt about, in this market here for sure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you very, very much, Tim, for coming to talk to me today. That was absolutely so informative and really helps people renovate smarter.
Great. Thank you very much for the invitation.
These are the key points from this episode. Wow, that was so interesting. Tim is a real expert in his field. I encourage my clients to talk to real estate agents all the time to get their questions answered. However, it was really great for me to get to the bottom of some of those curly questions that I really wanted to ask an agent myself. To conclude today, I just want to draw your attention to 3 main points. Firstly, if you've got design brief or budget questions, it's always worth talking to a few experienced local real estate agents to get their opinion, particularly if you're considering selling in under 5 years. Agents talk to buyers on a daily basis, so they're in a unique position to provide information on features that add value and those that don't, as well as what people are prepared to pay for them. At the end of the day, it's your house, so you can do what you want. You don't have to follow the agent's advice. But I always think it's worth getting informed before you start spending any money, so there's no regrets later on. Secondly, it was interesting to find out the features of a house that add value in 2024. These vary depending on your location, but the most popular were a second living area, an ensuite and walk-in robe off the main bedroom, a mudroom for dumping clothes and shoes and bags, etc. on the way in from the car, and interestingly, a pool. The third point was that it's preferable to get advice from an agent as early in the design process as possible. This will ensure you've got clear direction forward on your design brief and, most importantly, your budget to avoid overcapitalisation. Agents can provide advice on rough floor plans or even simply a discussion of your design ideas. Next week, you'll find out what's happening in the real estate market in Brisbane, southeast Queensland and all around Australia in 2024 and what's forecast to happen into 2025. I'll be talking again to Tim Douglas from Place West Estate Agents in Brisbane. Looking for more information on design, construction, costs or environment? You can find everything you need on the Renovation Collaborative website. Listen to the full podcast or get the transcript PDF edited into clear Q&A. If you're short on time, sign up for the weekly wrap newsletter and get the concise podcast summary delivered straight to your inbox. You'll also find 11 easy-to-read courses demystifying the entire home design and construction process.